Hello, win column. The Oklahoma Sooners take down the Kansas Jayhawks 52-42 is a huge offensive explosion. We're going to break it all down on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Oklahoma Sooners over at thesoonerswire.com, and you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners. He's Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref. And Norman, Josh, we got a W.
How sweet it is, right? Back into the win column, and in terms of conference play, finally, period, into the win column. Not back into the win column, into the win column for the first time, obviously, this season for Oklahoma. I don't think we can overstate the importance of this win for the Sooners. We said it all of last week, the necessity to avoid this thing from going completely off the rails and completely unhinged. You had to find a way to come home, beat Kansas and Norman. And regardless of what the, trajectory of the game itself, offensively, defensively, what it looked like, there's a ton to be excited about offensively. Obviously, defensively, some questions still coming out of this thing. But the way that you found yourself into the win column, I mean, really, it's as simple as you head into the bye week now. You've won a game in conference. You needed to beat this Kansas team at home with them playing a backup quarterback. And ultimately, John, regardless of, again, how it looked, Oklahoma found a way to win 52-42. And right now, for the Sooners, man, for Brent Venables, for this program, any kind of a win, you're going to take it.
I think a lot of people last week, myself included, were just hoping for a more competitive team, a more competitive effort than what we saw against TCU. I mean, we're tossing the Texas game out the window for the most part because they just didn't have their full complement of offensive players. Obviously, Dillon Gabriel being the big key on that front. And so looking at back to the TCU game, like it was also a rough stretch, even with Dillon Gabriel in, but Oklahoma just came out of the gate on fire, just really efficient, hitting all their marks, running the ball well, throwing the ball well, and ultimately ended up with 701 yards of total offense. Dillon Gabriel threw for 403 yards. As a team, before they started kneeling down at the end in the final minute, they rushed for over 300 yards. Now, the official stat book will show 298, but this was a team that rushed for over 300 before they started taking negative plays to milk the clock. But it was just a really dominant offensive effort from this team. And it all starts with your quarterback. I mean, having Dillon Gabriel back, it's clear how much of a difference he makes for this team. Obviously, against TCU, he wasn't on. But I think what we saw on Saturday against the Jayhawks was a quarterback that when he is on, he's about as good as it can be in the Big 12 when you're throwing the football. Now we just got to hope that he stays on each week and that we get consistent effort. Now, Kansas's defense, it's not very good, but I mean, they were only allowing 26 points per game coming into this thing, and Oklahoma doubled them up. You don't do that without having a really strong offensive performance. The coaches, I think, came in with a really, really good game plan. There was really good balance throughout. So just a huge effort. Eric Gray was phenomenal in this game, 176 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. The dude was just electric. And I posted it on our Locked On Sooners Twitter account, just his game log from last year and how it still makes me sad to look back at that. And you think about games against Iowa State, Baylor, and in the second half against Oklahoma State, and you're wondering, how can this guy not get more touches with the explosiveness that he has and his ability to make people miss, at the line of scrimmage and in the open field? I'm just thankful we're getting to see it now. Hopefully, it'll continue. I hate the idea that maybe he's going off to the NFL next year because that means that we won't get more Eric Gray, but the dude's just been phenomenal this season.
Yeah, again, I mean, just so much across the board to really like about what Oklahoma did individually, collectively, offensively, and actually kind of one of the beautiful things is some of the mistakes that Oklahoma made offensively in this game. I mean, the Sooners rack up 700 yards of total offense. You mentioned it, 400 plus throwing, let's call it 300 plus rushing in the game for the Sooners. And, the interception that Dillon Gabriel threw in this game was kind of curious, right? I mean, was that a miscommunication between he and the receiver? So that was a mistake there. The option play where he fumbled it the first time Dillon Gabriel fumbled it, I don't know what happened on that play other than just completely lost track of the football for whatever reason, untouched. So with all of the positive things that happened, it actually could have been even a little bit cleaner performance, John. And, throwing the football for Gabriel, he finishes 29 of 42. I'm looking at here, passing, 1 interception. And I think now we're kind of coming to the realization that this is, should not be a shocking thing to say, but at times Dillon Gabriel is going to miss some open receivers, right? I mean, and I think we saw that again in this game versus Kansas. With all of the great things that OU did, Dillon Gabriel at times had some guys that he just missed on some targets. And I think now kind of the proof is in the pudding there that that's something that you're probably just going to have to expect.
Yeah, there were a couple throws where you're like, oh man, he's got Marvin Mims. That guy's got a step and it just sails. It's going to happen. You're going to miss throws down the field, but he completed 69% of his passes, which is pretty good. Like that's really good. And they weren't all just dink and dunk throws all the time either. I mean, he had, just doing the math off the top of my head, 13, 16, 22 passes from 10 yards in, but he threw the ball beyond 10 yards, 6, 15, 16, 19 times beyond 10 yards and had a really good completion percentage on that. Beyond 20 yards, he was 3 of 6, which is really good. If you're completing 50% of your passes beyond 20 yards down the field, that's a pretty good rate in my opinion. And so while there were some misses, he was money. Like he was throwing dimes on a lot of occasions. And, the receiving core, Marvin Mims, Braden Willis in particular, like those two guys feasted. I think we can safely say that Marvin Mims was fed in this game. He ended up with 15 targets, according to Pro Football Focus. I know on the broadcast at one point in time, they said 19 targets. I've seen 18 targets in different places, but the dude was getting the ball his way a lot and he rewarded Oklahoma. Braden Willis's game. This is the game that I was expecting from him at several times this season. He was one of my players that I was kind of pegging as a breakout performer for this team. And that's exactly why, because he can do everything really well in the running game and he can make you pay in the passing game. His touchdown reception was a thing of beauty. I dubbed him Ballet Braden on Locked On Sooners Twitter account because it was just tight rope in the sideline and was phenomenal. Should have had a pass interference drawn down there around the goal line, but the refs just kind of ignored the tugging on his shoulder pads as the ball kind of sailed beyond him. So really good game. Back to your thought on Dillon Gabriel in the interception. I do think that was one of those situations where Gabriel was expecting the wide receiver to continue to run through the route, and he put it right where he would have been had he continued to run, and the defender just kind of stepped into it. I mean, it was right there, but had the receiver continued his route and not stopped short, I think either it's an incomplete pass or if the receiver is able to make a strong play on it, then it's probably a reception too. So that's kind of where I was with that. And I think the turnovers, yeah, it's unfortunate. The mistakes are unfortunate, but like you said, if they play a cleaner game, maybe they put 60 up on the board. If they manage the last minute drive at the end of the second quarter, if they manage that better, perhaps they put 60 on the board. So while we can nitpick some of these mistakes and nitpick some of these miscalculations of time management, a phenomenal game still. And it was impressive that really the only thing that stopped Oklahoma, aside from that goal line stand, was Oklahoma. Kansas forced one punt in the first half, and I need to look back, but I don't know how many. I don't think they forced many punts in the second half. Yeah, Oklahoma didn't punt. Oklahoma didn't punt in the second half at all. They went in. So the first half they went touchdown, touchdown, fumble, touchdown, punt, touchdown, touchdown, and then the turnover on downs at half. And then in the second half, it was touchdown, the interception, touchdown, fumble, field goal, and then into the game. So phenomenal performance, a very efficient performance. I mean, anytime you run 100 plays, you're feeling really good about yourself.
Yeah, it was really kind of the first time that we got probably what was the full Jeff Lebby offense experience in a game, right? Let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's talk about the importance of what Eric Gray and others did in the backfield. I think, obviously rolling into a bye week, it's just, look, we cannot downplay the importance of Oklahoma having this type of performance headed into a bye week. I want to tell you about SimpliSafe Homes. The numbers, John, they don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people, they've chosen SimpliSafe Home Security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something, right? At SimpliSafe, your safety, that's the only thing that matters. They protect you with cutting-edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. Here's some of the reasons why I love it. With 24/7 professional monitoring, SimpliSafe's agents, they call you the moment a threat is detected. Imagine that. Yeah, I mean, you're getting a call as soon as there's a problem. They dispatch police or first responders in an emergency. That's even if you're not home or you can't be reached. SimpliSafe, it blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedoncollege. That's simplisafe.com/lockedoncollege. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Again, visit simplisafe.com/lockedoncollege to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. So we had touched on this past week just really the imperative nature to enter the bye week with a win. And, we're going to have a lot of time over the next couple of weeks, John, I think, to just kind of really drill down into the importance of that. But just surface level, the importance coming out of this football game, John, I think one of the most important things for OU is just the way that they offensively dominated up front. And listen, does it boast one of the best defensive lines that Oklahoma is going to see the rest of the way? No, it does not. But for Oklahoma to rush it the way that they rushed it throughout this game, for Eric Gray to do what he did, for Javonte Barnes to add a couple of touchdowns himself as well, John, I just think, again, especially going into the bye week, I just think so many positives that Oklahoma can take with them into obviously what is going to be the home stretch of football that is really going to define whether or not, there's maybe some fans that have already made that mind up, John, that this is not the season they were hoping it was going to be for Oklahoma football. But listen, if they win out or they win all but one of their remaining games, then all of a sudden you can kind of feel like you got something out of this 2022 season. So just the positive nature up front, I think, is imperative for this team going into the bye week.
Yeah, you hate to go into a bye week with a loss. You especially hate to go into a bye week with 4 straight losses. And so, yeah, it was huge for this team to get a win and to play as well as they played offensively, especially. And I mean, we'll have a chance to talk about the defense, but they had some good moments. I mean, there was a stretch, towards the end of the first quarter, through about midway through the second quarter, about 5 minutes of play in the second quarter, where Oklahoma, their defense forced punt, got the interception, and then forced a punt. Like, that was a really good stretch for the Oklahoma Sooners defense. Now, it didn't necessarily last. Kansas was able to start putting some things together and scoring some points, but it's something to build off of. It's something that they can take into the bye week and like, all right, look, here's the positive. Here's what we did well, as they also try to, dissect what they didn't do well. It's always great to be able to layer a negative with a positive, and to be able to do that, you got to create some positives on the football field, and they did that. So, shout out to them. You don't win this game without the defense making a few stops, and they did that. The first quarter, it looked like it was going to be a back and forth shootout all game long, and then Oklahoma started making some plays defensively, forcing Jason Bean into some mistakes. At one point in time in the first half, he was just like 11 of 22, passing. not an efficient first half, but I think the Oklahoma defense was actually, doing a few things to make it difficult for him to make some plays. So, got to give a little kudos to the defense on this one, because they actually made stops. It wasn't completely a sieve. Like, they weren't completely just getting blown away all game long. You touched on the offensive line and how well they run blocked. Pass protection, I thought, was also huge in this one. Dillon Gabriel was only hit one time, and that was the sack, which was just a great play by the defensive end. He just blew right by Wanye Morris, who held him, and they still gave up the sack. So that's fantastic. Only pressured 3 total times, according to Pro Football Focus, with the one quarterback hit, which was the sack. You keep your quarterback clean like that, you're going to win a lot of football games. Now, they were missing their best defensive end, Lonnie Phelps, who had 6 sacks going into this game. He only played a few, like maybe a handful of snaps. But they did what they had to do against the rest of the unit, and they played really well in pass protection. And credit to Jeff Lebby also for having a game plan that was going to get the ball out of his hands relatively quickly, but he was getting it downfield quickly as well. So offensive line was fantastic. It's just a lot to like. And I think, yes, big picture view for this team, you've got something positive to build upon as you get ready for now Iowa State in 2 weeks, which is going to be a tough game. Going to Ames, playing a defense of that caliber, it gives you something to be like, all right, our offense is clicking. We found our stride. We're going to be able to do some things moving forward.
Easily the best game, right, up front. I mean, just across the board for Oklahoma along the offensive line. I mean, whether it's just this group, Chris Murray, Wanye Morris, Anton Harrison, McCade Metallier, and Andrew Rame, if it's just that cohesion finally coming together, if it's a little bit of you're playing this Kansas team, I'm sure it's a combination to some degree of that. But, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, look, I can sit here and talk about the rushing yards and Eric Gray and what Javonte Barnes did, but you make great points on the way that Dillon Gabriel just got to sit back there, survey, and really make throws all day long, John.
Well, and what really stood out to me as I'm looking at the snap counts from Pro Football Focus is that Robert Conjal, he played 60 snaps in this game. McCade Metallier only played 41. So, like, they were rotating the 2 of those guys at left guard. Your other 4 offensive linemen played all 101 snaps. Anton Harrison, Chris Murray, Andrew Rame, Wanye Morris. They played every single snap in this game, and so did Dillon Gabriel. The only 5 that played every single snap on the offensive side of the ball. So is there a little bit of a competition brewing again at left guard? Was there an injury that popped up that kept McCade out for a little while? I'm not sure. I didn't notice anything. I don't remember anything from the broadcast that had him sitting down. So it'll be interesting to follow that little nugget as we continue to move forward. Did Robert Conjal earn some playing time with his performance in practice, and so they started to rotate him in? I don't know. It'll be something interesting to watch. I just found that was really, really interesting because we'd had this group of 5 basically pretty well set in stone from the beginning of the season. Now to see kind of another guy kind of earning some time, earning some snaps, it'll be interesting to see how that continues, going down the line. I think that it's good to see this team was able to respond. We talked about how important it was for them to rebound after Kansas State, and they kind of fell flat a little bit defensively against TCU. Offensively, they weren't clicking early in that game. Texas was a wash, just completely. Again, if you're going to throw a game tape out the window, you throw that one out. You launch a grenade at it and you set it on fire. You never speak of it again. But this team came out of the gate flying. It's their first opening possession touchdown since the UTEP game, which I think is really important. That's key too, is being able to start fast. You got to score. Like, you can't just talk about starting fast and then not score points. You got to be able to score points on those opening drives, because it really does set a tone for everything else that you do as a team, offensively and defensively. So I think that was a huge key for them in this game, is to be able to get the first points and then to be able to respond to Kansas's points through the first quarter and match them score for score. And then once your defense kind of settled in and started making stops, that you took advantage of that offensively and started putting points up on the board yourself.
No doubt. And I think you hit on the most important thing coming out of this game is for Oklahoma, they win a football game, and now you can take some confidence here moving forward. There's winnable games the rest of the way. I mean, I think the way Oklahoma's offense played, it can beat everybody on its schedule, everybody remaining on its schedule, if they can shore up, just get a little bit better defensively, John. I mean, we saw, like you said, stretches of some positive defense from Oklahoma. I don't think we saw a ton of it, and certainly not enough of it. But, for Oklahoma, man, I think clearly the way that, again, they started fast, like you just said, and really carried it throughout the whole game to the tune of 700 plus yards. I mean, look, if you didn't know it going into this Kansas game, it's obvious that the Oklahoma offense that we saw Kansas State and before, it's back, right? I mean, this is a good offense. I'm not here to say it's one of the nation's absolute finest offenses, but it's a pretty darn good offense with Dillon Gabriel out there, and they can beat everybody the rest of the way if they, find a way to just improve a little bit, I think, defensively.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the defense on the other side of this, but let me talk to you about BetOnline. It's your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information. They got the game lines, the over-unders, the money lines, everything that you can need. It's the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to BetOnline or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. So defensively, Josh, we kind of touched on it several times now throughout the show, but I think it's kind of important just to spend a little bit of a segment on that because there were some positive things to take away. But at the end of the day, you still gave up 42 points. At the end of the day, you allowed Kansas, who we all last week we talked about how this was a good offense. Kansas racked up 430 total yards, 165 yards on the ground, 22 first downs. The thing that I think they did better in this game than they've done in the past was stopping Kansas on third down. Coming into the game, Kansas was converting 55% of their third downs, which was fourth in the nation. You held them to 5 of 11, so less than 50% conversion rate on third down. Absolutely huge. After Texas was able to do whatever they wanted to do on third down, you improved, you got better, you made stops, got off the field. But ultimately, Brent Venables says it. He says best is the standard. And while they did do some good things in this game, there's still a lot that they got to improve upon.
No doubt. No doubt. They have to keep getting better. I mean, look, now, it's probably worth pointing out, too, on the defensive front, Oklahoma had some large stretches of bad in this game defensively, okay? Let's get that out of the way right off the top. I'm not trying to sit here and ignore that, but Oklahoma's offense actually put them in a couple of bad spots with the turnovers that they had in this game that directly led to, I believe, 14 points for Kansas in the game. I think they scored twice off the pair of Oklahoma turnovers in the game. So, 14 on the board in some form or fashion, you can actually attribute to the offense's mistakes. So don't forget about that for Oklahoma defensively in this game. Obviously, you mentioned the third down conversion percentage defense. We said, really, probably you were going to be able to determine whether or not OU won this game or if Kansas won this game based on what that number looked like, because Kansas came into the game so good in the third down conversion percentage department offensively. And OU, actually, that number ended up a little bit better later in the game for Kansas. Earlier in the game, I think that was trending in a better direction for Oklahoma, earlier, and then Kansas got a couple of conversion tries late. I thought at times OU was better against the run in this game. I know the final numbers don't necessarily bear that out. I'm looking here. Kansas rushed for 4.7 a carry, but at times Oklahoma was good defending the run. And we kind of talked about that too, which was, at this point, is Oklahoma going to be this smash mouth, knock you at the point of attack every snap, rushing defense? No, I don't think that's very realistic to have that expectation with this Oklahoma team. But can you be competent defensively defending the rush? And I thought, really, we kind of saw some of that from OU.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they did a better job at, just getting into the backfield a little bit, making plays, stretching plays along the perimeter. And it's a lot of the things that Brent Venables was talking about when they run wide, being fundamentally sound and forcing plays back inside or stretching them to the sideline as a unit. And I do think that they did a better job at that. Tackling it's just going to be what it's going to be. I mean, they've got good players on the other side. You're going to miss some tackles from time to time. Still, the pass rush not really there. Jason Bean, I felt like he was mostly comfortable. There were a few times where they got a little bit of pressure, but he was able to elude it or get outside the pocket and find some space and make some things happen. A few interesting notes on the defensive snaps that I found were kind of fascinating. So Ethan Downs only plays 18 snaps in this game. Amongst your edge rushers, your defensive ends, that was, behind Jonah Laula, behind R. Mason Thomas, behind Marcus Stripling, and behind Reggie Grimes. That was fourth in snaps among your kind of primary defensive ends there. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, we got a little bit of a taste of Robert Spears Jennings, which, I mean, the one play that he really stood out was, just chasing Jason Bean, kind of stretching him out down the sideline and then just putting a hit on him. I thought that was impressive. It's a small thing, but when the quarterback runs and you get an opportunity to hit him hard. And he did that. I think that's going to be one of those that, as the coach, goes through the coach's tape and they kind of highlight some things, that'll be a play that they highlight. He didn't let up and just kind of push the guy out of the bounds. He played physical. And I think that'll earn them a little bit of, or earn him a little bit more playing time. Jaron Kanik, he played 7 snaps. I guess we're still just not going to get him on the field very much. Cedric Roberts played 4 snaps. So kind of your young guys starting to get into the mix a little bit more. And one guy that, I think played a pretty good game overall was Desean White. I thought early in the game, he was struggling a little bit, especially there was an option play where I felt like he just didn't know what to do, or he took the quarterback and let them pitch it outside and there was no help outside. But I feel like as the game wore on, he started making a lot of plays, whether it was tackles or batting down passes, almost had an interception, if I remember right, got pressure on Bean at one point. So I thought he played a pretty solid game. And then we got to talk about CJ Colden, dude. This is 2 weeks in a row now with an interception after I feel like he was kind of mostly absent for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. He's really come on strong. And is that what led to DJ Graham's move from cornerback to wide receiver? Is the play of CJ Colden either in practice or in games, because Colden ended up playing 22 snaps. Woody Washington, Key Lawrence, Jaden Davis kind of led your defensive back group. Justin Broyles had a bunch of snaps, but then after that 4, CJ Colden was kind of the next defensive back on the field for you, for Oklahoma. So just really interesting note there. And he makes plays. He's made 2 plays each week using that athleticism and coming up with picks.
Desean White, by the way, did have an interception in the game.
Okay. That's it.
And I think I think he almost had another one too. So I think you might be right on the money with that. CJ Colden, though, that interception that he had, little tip drill up to himself, and then just obviously able to complete the play was pretty impressive on really a pass that if he doesn't find a way to tip that football, it's going to be a completion, if I remember right, by the Kansas sideline, and instead obviously he breaks it up and winds up with what was an acrobatic interception. So you could be onto something else there too, that, because of what they've seen, some of it from CJ Colden, that has given the Oklahoma staff some comfortability in terms of making the switch from DJ Graham from defense back to offense. Obviously, we know DJ Graham has a history playing wide receiver in the past and was, really, really talented in that regard before he arrived at Oklahoma. So, I mean, maybe it's just a matter of, also offensively for the staff kind of surveying the landscape that they currently have and saying, you know what, we could use one more skill guy offensively. I don't know. That'd be a good question to ask the coaching staff this week. Just kind of drill more down into the how and the why sort of all of that transpired with DJ Graham. But man, you're right. I mean, obviously CJ Colden, that's a big piece of production that he's added the last couple of weeks for Oklahoma, for a defense that has sorely needed someone back there, John, to either come away with the PBU or, the electric interception play.
Yeah, 100%. A couple more guys we need to highlight in this one. Drake Stoops, I thought, had a really solid game again. 4 receptions for 43 yards. And then he had 2 carries for 23 yards all week long last week. We talked about, let's not run the jet sweep with Drake Stoops. Jeff Lebby comes out, and it's very effective with Drake Stoops. So I will no longer ask for them to stop running jet sweep with Drake Stoops. Dillon Gabriel completed 4 or more passes to 5 wide receivers. I mean, they had 7 wide receivers catch passes. Gavin Freeman with the big one. He only caught 1 pass, but it was a huge play. But I love the distribution where you can have 5 guys catch 4 or more balls. It just takes the pressure off of everybody when you have that kind of output, that kind of production. Jalil Farouk, 4 catches on 4 targets for 42 yards. Theo Weiss, 4 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Again, we talked about Marvin Mims, 9 for 106. This might be the lowest. If you're going to get a 100-yard game from Marvin Mims, I don't know if there's a game where he's averaged, less than 15 yards per reception and also had 100 yards receiving. So very interesting, more of a possession receiver type game for him. And then, weight room Willie just coming up big, 5 for 102 and a touchdown. So just a really solid performance all the way around for everybody. I think it's going to be fun to just kind of see how this team builds off of this effort.
How good is Eric Gray? I mean, that's something probably we got to talk about this week in a little bit more detail. I mean, some of the moves that he was putting on folks in the Kansas second level and beyond. He's a tough guy to bring down. He finished with, let's see here, 8.8 per carry. So he is really, really running it well for Oklahoma right now. I know we touched on the offensive line, but part of the reason those numbers look so good is just how great Eric Gray was in this football game. So all around, it's a victory Monday, ladies and gentlemen. 52-42. The Sooners have won a football game. Unbelievable.
Yep. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining the show wherever you get your podcasts. Again, we're free and available on all platforms. Make sure you go to YouTube, hit the subscribe button over there as well. And when you're done listening to this show, go check out a great Locked On Big 12 podcast hosted by our guy, Josh Neighbors. Every day, Josh hosts, and he brings on local experts as well to take you across the Big 12 in 30 minutes. Make Locked On Big 12 your second listen every day here on the Locked On Network. For Josh Helmer, I'm John Williams. We'll catch you next time. Boomer Sooner.